Am I the idiot for breaking my fiancé's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? Myself, female 25, and my fiancé, male 27, have a 2-month-old son. We are overjoyed at being parents, but most of my in-laws are refusing to even see our baby because of a decision we made concerning his name. My in-laws have a tradition of giving the firstborn son of every generation the same name. Let's say it's Peter. This has been going on for about 7 generations already, and they're very serious about it. My fiancé's eldest cousin was the latest person to get named Peter. Every one of his cousins has only had daughters so far, so our baby is the first son of his generation, and consequently should get the name. I have no problem with the name Peter, and would have been okay with naming my son that. Unfortunately, that was also the name of my uncle, who died before I was born. I won't get into details, but it was tragic and traumatizing for my family. My father never got over losing his younger brother. My grandmother asked the family not to name any of our future children Peter during her lifetime. My mother-in-law and father-in-law knew about this promise, and at first seemed to not only be okay with us avoiding the name Peter, but also supportive of the one we chose. However, my grandmother sadly passed away when I was 7 months pregnant. We traveled for her funeral. On our last days there, my in-laws called to offer me their condolences. Then my mother-in-law asked me if I was willing to think about the name Peter now. Suddenly, they were insistent that the name we chose was awful and we had to honor their tradition. According to them, they had only agreed to make an exception for us for my grandmother's sake, and had no obligation to keep it now that she had passed. My family agrees that while it's true we don't have to avoid the name anymore, it still doesn't feel right to use it. My fiancé agrees with me as well, but his parents spent the last weeks of my pregnancy trying to convince us to change our minds about the name. When our baby was born and we named him what we wanted, my in-laws were furious that we had broken a 7-generation-old family tradition. Some of them hadn't previously wanted to name their sons Peter, but did it anyway for the family's sake. They said our decision was selfish, and that my family should have moved on by now. This has truly nothing to do with whether my family has moved on or not. It just felt like a betrayal to my grandmother and uncle's memories to even consider using the name. My father-in-law offered us $1,000 to change our son's name to Peter after he was born. That was 2 months ago, and neither of my fiancé's parents have met the baby or seen us since I was pregnant. Most of my in-laws are on their side, and this is causing a huge rift between my fiancé and his family. He assures me he's fine, but I'm starting to feel really guilty about this. Am I the idiot? Edit. The tradition started, as far as I know, when OG Peter died and his son, also named Peter, named his firstborn after his father. Peter III ended up having the first son of the following generation, and did the same thing. That one died before having children, so his sister gave the name to her son, and so on. The name, Peter, is very common in my country, so none of them ever got bullied over it, and the fact that it was also my uncle's name isn't as unlikely as one might think. Also, middle names aren't used in my country. Most people get the maternal surname before the paternal one instead. Edit 2, it wasn't $1,000. Different country, different currency. It's still a lot of money, but would probably translate to about $200. Now for a few comments before the update. Not the idiot. Family name traditions are weird and you can do whatever you want and name your baby whatever you want. Keep pushing the I'm honoring my late grandmother's final wishes hard so they see how unhinged they sound asking you to flout that. Comment 2, not the idiot. Just because they named their kids a name they didn't like to keep up a tradition, doesn't mean you have to. He is your son, you guys name him whatever you want. As an aside, once again, tradition is a euphemism for misogyny. Note only male children have a special name, and all the female children were not fought over. Presumably no one cared what they were called. All the more reason to end this now. Now for the update. A lot has happened since I posted, so I thought I'd give you an update. About a week after my post, my fiancé's parents contacted us. They apologized for their behavior, and begged to meet my son. They said they were ready to leave the naming debacle behind and truly wanted to be involved in their grandson's life. We were skeptical, but invited them over to meet the baby. The visit went well. They began coming over almost every day during the next 3 weeks. I noticed neither of them ever called my son by his name, but I didn't point it out. For the first time in months, things seemed good between my fiancé and his parents. One day, my fiancé was helping my file with something at our place, so my mother-in-law and I went to the park with my baby. Sometime later, I had to go to the bathroom, so I left him in the stroller with her. When I got back, she was sitting on a park bench, chatting with a woman who was cooing over my son. I went over there and introduced myself as son's name, Mom. And she said, I thought his name was Peter. I didn't say a word, and neither did my mother-in-law. She followed me to the car and we went back to my apartment. On the way there, I texted my fiancé about what had happened. The moment we got there, he kicked both his parents out of our place. He'd read my texts and confronted his father. Thankfully, my father-in-law is a terrible liar, and confessed immediately. Apparently, both my in-laws only call my son Peter. That includes whenever they're talking about him, every time they introduce him to someone else, and even baby talking to him on the few occasions they were left alone with him. Neither of them are embarrassed by this, and they both think they're in the right. We're heartbroken. Especially my fiancé. Not only because his parents can't let go of their pride, but also because the name we chose for our son means a lot to us both. I blame myself for encouraging my fiancé to allow them near our son. I was raised in a different city than all my grandparents, and always wished they could have been more involved in my life. Losing my grandmother didn't help. Pretty much every doubt I had only existed because I thought it would be important for my son to grow up with all of his grandparents around. But now, all my guilt is gone. If they can't respect my son enough to call him by his name, they don't deserve to be in his life. I hope they enjoyed the 3 weeks they had with their grandson, because that's all they're getting until they get their heads out of their asses. Comment 1. It's a sad situation and sorry about it, OP. You gave them a chance and they threw it away like chumps, and then you and your husband communicated and made an adult decision on something so difficult together. You two should be proud. I hope your grandson grows up proud of his parents and his name. Comment 2. Yikes. Are they this psychotic and unhinged about other things in life or just this one issue? The poster responded, according to my fiancé, they've always been a little entitled, but I never really saw them enough to be able to say that. I will say that, though they were polite, they very clearly didn't care about me until we moved in together. My mother-in-law pretended not to remember my name every time she saw me, and my father-in-law would lose interest in any conversations that weren't about him. Once it was clear me and my fiancé were in it for the long term, they started acting a lot more friendly towards me, but it never seemed sincere. Now, for the next story, am I the idiot for introducing my boyfriend's parents as Grandma and Grandpa to my son? This last Thursday I, female 29, went over to my boyfriend, Jay's, male 25, house for Thanksgiving and brought my son with me. I and Jay have been together for a year and a half now, and he is the most amazing man in the world. He's been amazing with my son, his bio father is not in his life, and I can genuinely see him as the one. Jay's parents came over as well. It's not that I don't get along with them, it's just I have only ever seen them 3 times before this Thanksgiving. I have not had any time to really bond with them, I guess. They had never met my son in person either, but they both knew about him. By the time I arrived, Jay's parents were already there and helping him finish up dinner. We greeted each other, and Jay's dad asked, "And who's this little guy?" I introduced them to my son and then introduced Jay's parents as Grandma and Grandpa to my precious boy. I didn't notice at the time, but all 3 of them became quiet almost immediately. I ended up waiting in the living room alone for almost half an hour before dinner, and things just were incredibly awkward for the rest of the night. My son did end up calling his parents by Grandpa and Grandma, and I quickly noticed both of them would be very disingenuous and awkward about it over dinner, but they did not say anything to me about it. They didn't stick around for long after either, but when they left both were very cold to me. I asked Jay what their deal was and he lost it at me. He claims I put him in an incredibly awkward position. His parents apparently didn't think we were that serious yet and began to question him if I was only using him as a replacement daddy. He said that it was way out of line to introduce them that way without even talking to him beforehand. I think it's ridiculous. If one day he's going to be my son's stepdad, then why go through this formal nonsense? He claimed that's not the point. And we ended up fighting till I stormed out. We have not talked since, and I have simply been waiting for an apology. I talked with my sister about it last night, and she said she was mortified to hear this, saying she also didn't get the read that we were all that serious, and she never felt like Jay intended to take on a dad role. This has got me questioning if I was wrong. Edit. Okay, I messed up. I genuinely thought Jay would be okay with this. Jay has always treated my son so well, I guess I misread treating him kindly as being okay with being his father figure. I'm pretty sure I ruined this for myself, but most importantly I hurt my son through all this. Edit 2. I called Jay and apologized. We're going to be taking a break. I'm going to look into making sure I didn't scar my kid with this. Now for a few comments before the update. You're the idiot. That's a major leap to introduce them with those terms when they don't fulfill that role. And the fact that he may one day be stepdad doesn't mean he's dad unless you had a serious discussion about if he will take on that role. Comment 2. Are you really shocked that the parents of a 25-year-old aren't ready to be called Grandma and Grandpa yet? You're the idiot. You massively overstepped. It was not your place to introduce them at all, and especially not without asking if they were okay with that title. Now for the update. I thought I would update everyone on what happened. Immediately when I realized I was in the wrong, I called Jay and apologized for what happened. He told me he needed some space and wanted to take a break. I ended up calling his mother as well and apologized profusely. His mother forgave me, and after I explained my reasoning said she didn't hold it against me. However, in retrospect, I think she was only being nice to me knowing her son was going to end the relationship. Speaking of, Jay ended the relationship. I decided to take the advice given here about sitting down with Jay and getting on the same page about our relationship. I also saw some of the comments here about taking a break equals relationship ended, so I called Jay and told him that I wanted to talk sooner rather than later about this. We met yesterday, and while I feel our talk went well, it was really obvious to me that Jay was done with the relationship. He said that, while he always knew that me and my son were a package deal, he had not decided at that point if he was truly going to take on the dad role for my son. He felt like my interpreting his niceness and acceptance of my son as a fatherly role was a red flag for him overall, especially because we had never talked about it at all. He said that the real problem he had was me deciding that his parents were grandma and grandpa, without even talking to him about it. My original refusal to apologize and expecting him to as well were part of it as well. There are other things he brought up that I feel are beyond this issue anyway, so I'm going to leave them out. Many of the criticisms left on my original post lined up with what he said, so I can really say for certain I messed up big time. I apologized, but I knew there was really no hope of saving this, so I didn't push when he said he felt like we should end the relationship. Overall, my last post made me realize that I really need to work on my own expectations for my partner and how he will fit into my son's life. I also really need to work on my own communication skills. Comment 1. That post made me cringe so hard I turned inside out. Thanks for the update, OP. Glad a lesson was learned. Please don't set up your kid for disappointment again. Comment 2. Thank you for the update. I'm sorry this one didn't work out for you, but congratulations on doing the hard work and introspection you needed to do to own your part and why. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to drop a like. It really helps the channel grow. See you next time.